Chris Graham here for Trailblazer RV. We're going to take you through a new RV orientation on this 2010 KZ RV Spree 289 KS. Starting right here at the front of the trailer, where you've got your battery and propane. To access your propane bottles, just open up the access panel on the front cap. You've got dual 30-pound propane bottles back here. Both of these are full right now, and these are both brand new propane bottles, as the old ones were nearing their expiry. So these propane bottles are both good for close to 10 years. You've got an automatic switchover propane regulator here, and as you can see, the little indicator showing red, that shows that there's no propane flowing from the supply bottle. As we open this valve, that red indicator will turn from red to green. That shows that there's propane flowing from the supply bottle. What we recommend is opening both bottles. Then the regulator will deplete the supply bottle first, then automatically, once this is empty, switch over and start to pull from the second bottle. At that point, you can flip the supply lever over to the other bottle, and you can remove the first bottle to go and refill it without ever having to shut down your propane system. Right in front of your propane tanks is where you'll find your battery. This is the upgraded Group 31 RV battery. It's the biggest 12-volt battery that we offer, and pretty simple connection. Red wire is positive, black wire is negative. It is a flooded wet cell battery, so it requires a little bit of maintenance. If you peel this sticker off, underneath you'll find 6 cells. You can open up those cells once or twice a year and check the fluid level in each of those cells. If the fluid level seems a little bit low, and especially if you can see metal plates sticking through the liquid, you can top it up with some distilled water and put a good charge on the battery. We also recommend that you remove this battery over the winter for storage. Store it inside, somewhere where it's not going to freeze, and preferably not on a concrete surface. Around the side of the trailer, you've got stabilizer jacks on all 4 corners. So once you're set up at the campground, you can crank these down to be snug with the ground. These are not for leveling the trailer though. If you're in a very unlevel RV site, the best way to level the trailer is still to back the low side up onto blocks and then deploy the stabilizing jacks to be snug with the ground, just to give a little extra stability. With these rear slide model trailers, it's always a good idea to have your rear stabilizer jacks down at least before you extend the rear slide out. It's just going to help with stability and keep the trailer level once that slide comes out. Right here you've got a couple of plumbing features. This is your utility shower. So pretty simple, a little shower head in there with hot and cold water. It lifts up to about this high. The only thing that I like to point out with this is don't forget to winterize it. If you're going to be doing your own winterizing, it's a part that's commonly forgotten, and it will freeze and break if you forget to winterize it. Next to that is your sewer tank flush system. So when you're dumping your holding tanks, you can hook a garden hose up to here to spray out the inside of that black holding tank, or that sewer holding tank. So it'll spray all the sludge off the sides of the tank and off of the monitor probes to keep that monitor panel reading accurately. Speaking of dumping your holding tanks, that will happen from right here. So the trailer comes with a new 20-foot medium heavy-duty sewer hose. It's stored right now in the rear bumper. When you go to dump your holding tanks, you'll attach that hose right onto here. Other end goes into the ground, and then you've got 2 valves. You've got a sewer dump valve and a wastewater dump valve. They're labeled above the valves. Always pull the sewer dump valve first to dump your black holding tank. Once that's finished draining, you can close this valve and open the wastewater valve to dump your gray holding tank. That's your sink and shower water. As long as you do it in that order, you can always use your gray water to kind of flush the black sewage holding tank contents through the hose so that there's no gunk left in there when you disconnect the hose from the trailer. So once you've closed both of those valves, you can disconnect the hose, store it back in the rear bumper. A couple more plumbing related items. You've got your freshwater tank fill right here. So this is just a gravity fill right into the freshwater holding tank. And below that is your city water connection. So if you're camped somewhere where you have water hookups, you can hook your water hose directly up to the trailer here. When you're hooking into pressurized city water, we recommend using a water pressure regulator. It's just a little brass fitting about that big that goes on the end of your hose to maintain a proper operating pressure in the water lines so you don't over pressurize any water lines. We also recommend for both of these items using one of the white drinking water specific garden hoses. That'll just ensure that you don't get that plasticky chemical taste in your drinking water that you'd get from a garden hose. Right next to that is your hot water tank. And we can open that up using the wing nut. This is a 6-gallon gas electric hot water tank, so you can run it on either propane or electricity. If you're staying at a site that has electrical hookups and you want to run it on electricity, you'll have to turn on this black rocker switch in the bottom corner of the tank. Turn that to the on position to operate the tank on electricity. This style of hot water tank uses an anode rod. You see we've supplied your anode rod as well as a spare anode rod here. This acts as the plug for the tank. So when you go to summarize the RV in the camping season, put the plug in place. It's a 1 1/8 inch socket, or 1 1/16 inch socket, I believe, to tighten up that plug before you can fill the tank with water. The other thing though that this anode rod does is this rod will corrode over time. The impurities in the water in the tank corrode the anode rod rather than the inside lining of the tank. So after a couple of years, this will get quite pitted and corroded looking. That's perfectly fine. It's doing what it's supposed to do. But once it gets down to just the tiny little rod in the center, it's time to replace it. And you can pick that up here or at any RV dealership. A couple more things on the outside of the hot water tank. There's 2 black reset buttons here. If you ever overheat the tank, most commonly by accidentally starting it up with no water in it, you'll have to come out here and just press these 2 reset buttons before the tank will start up again. And this device at the top is your pressure relief valve. So if the tank over pressurizes, this will pop to release the pressure from the water. Make sure before you pull the plug out when you're winterizing that you release the pressure from the tank by pulling this pressure relief valve. That way it won't spray you when you pull the plug. Right behind that is your power cord. So this is the power supply for the trailer. When you're parked at a site with 30 amp power, you can plug it in directly to the post. We also supply the park adapter to break this down from 30 amps to 15 amp electrical service, so you can plug it in to a house style 15 amp outlet. Your rear stabilizer jacks, again, as I mentioned before, a good idea to go ahead and put these jacks down before you open up your slide outs when you get to the campsite. Don't have the keys with me in my pocket, but inside here is a manual override. It's a storage compartment primarily, nice long storage compartment, but there's also a manual override in here should you ever need to manually bring in the rear slide. you can use a ratchet or a drill to manually bring that slide in. Around the back of the trailer, you'll see the spare tire mounted to the rear bumper. I just like to point out that the trailer doesn't come with a jack or a wheel wrench, so not a bad idea to just check the wheel wrench that it comes with your vehicle to make sure that it fits the lug nuts of the trailer, just in case you ever need to change a tire on the side of the road. Hopefully that doesn't come up. And the jack that comes with your tow vehicle should be more than capable of lifting the weight of the trailer in that event that you need to. Here at your running gear, just a couple of things to cover. Your tires are inflated to 65 psi. Good idea to check the tire pressure before you travel if you haven't towed for a little while, especially if it's been sitting over a winter. Your lug nuts are torqued to 100 foot-pounds. We also recommend periodically retorquing your lug nuts on an RV. The third thing here is your wheel bearings. Wheel bearing repacking is part of the regular maintenance of an RV. We recommend it, historically we recommend it every year. This trailer has Easy Lube axles. So if you pop the center cap out here, you'll find a grease zerk behind there, and you can grease your inner and outer wheel bearings with a grease gun. That doesn't eliminate the need to repack your wheel bearings, but it does prolong the intervals. So instead of repacking wheel bearings every year, you can probably repack your wheel bearings every 3 to 5 years, depending on how much you travel. That is as long as you're giving it an extra a shot of clean grease once or twice a year. No more than just one pump with a grease gun. You don't need to put a bunch of extra grease in there. Your entry steps, you've got 2 folding entry steps. They're both the same. The bottom step flips up, the top step rolls into place. So roll and then flip. And your lend-a-hand entry handle door, or entry door handle, just lifts up and folds over the door. That is stowed for travel, and it also ensures that the door can't pop open when you're traveling. Come on inside the trailer with me, and I'll show you a few more things. So right near the entry door under the cabinet is your main light switch. So that controls both the outside yard light and your main interior lighting. You've also got underneath here the controls for your power awning. So you can press and hold the extend button to extend the awning. That'll go out a full 8 feet. We won't bother to run it all the way out right now. You can stop it at any point along the way. If you've got a tree or another RV in the way, it doesn't have to go out the full 8 feet. And to retract it, just press and hold on the retract button. Just like so. No latching or locking necessary for the awning. Once it's all the way in, you're good to travel. Here in the kitchen, you've got your 3-burner gas cooktop. This will need to be lit manually with a barbecue lighter, so just turn the burners over to light and light the burners manually with a lighter. You also have an oven in this model, and there's a pilot light in this oven. So to light the pilot, turn the knob over to pilot on, push in and hold on that knob, and then you'll light the pilot right underneath here. You can see where my finger is, that's your pilot assembly. So once you've lit that and you see a blue flame, continue to hold in on this pilot knob for 10 or 15 seconds for that thermocouple to heat up. Then once you release the knob and the flame stays on, you can turn the oven up to temperature. Once you're finished using the oven, you can turn it back down to pilot on and leave the pilot burning, or you can turn it all the way off and just relight the pilot next time you need to use the oven. Beneath the oven is your power converter. This is the power center for the whole RV. This is where you'll find your 110 volt breakers for all of your 110 AC circuits, and 12 volt fuses for all of your DC circuits. You've got mostly 15 amp fuses here with a couple of 40 amp fuses. So not a bad idea in an RV to have some spare fuses with you, 15s and 40s, just in case you blow a fuse. Your fridge is an automatic gas electric fridge. So what we usually recommend is just set it to the automatic setting. The green light comes on showing that it's working. It'll always run on electricity if it has electricity available. When it doesn't have electricity available, it'll switch over to gas, and when it's running on gas, you'll see the orange gas light come on. You can override the automatic function to only run on gas, but there's not a lot of situations you'd want to do that. If you're plugged into a weak breaker and you're concerned about blowing the breaker, you may run the fridge on gas, and you may find that the fridge actually cools a little faster running on gas than electricity. However, having said that, it takes several hours to cool down an RV fridge. So recommend, whenever it's possible, get the fridge running the day before you head out to make sure that it's nice and cold when you load it up with food. This model of fridge has a temperature adjustment as well, 1 being the warmest, 5 being the coldest. I usually set it to 4, but you might find, depending on ambient temperature, that you have to adjust that occasionally. This style of fridge also has a little locking mechanism there. Don't get confused by this. This isn't to lock the fridge closed, it's to lock the fridge open. When you put the RV into storage, you can latch the fridge door just open a little bit so that it doesn't get musty inside. On the wall behind me here is the thermostat. So this controls both the heating and air conditioning for the RV. We're not plugged into power right now, so we won't be able to get the air conditioning to fire up. You need to be plugged into services for that. But for the air conditioning, if you just turn it over to cool and then leave the fan on automatic setting, just set the thermostat, and the air conditioning will cycle on and off as needed. With the heat, same thing, turn it over to heat. This fan switch does nothing in heat mode. There's only one fan speed for the furnace. So turn it over to heat and set the temperature that you're comfortable with. I'm sure you can hear in the video the fan coming on. That fan is going to run now for 15 or 20 seconds before the burner itself lights up. We should hear that when it happens. And it may have lit up already. This is a ducted forced air furnace. So your heat, and I can actually feel some heat here, is going to come through the round vents near the floor, and then your return air is here. So you won't actually feel any heat coming from here. Once that temperature comes up to what the temperature is set at, or you shut off the furnace, exactly the same thing's going to happen, only in reverse. The burner is going to go out immediately, but that fan now is going to continue to run for 30 seconds to a minute just to go through its cycle before it shuts off. Here in the bathroom slash second entryway, we've got a couple of things worth pointing out. One is your monitor panel. So this is where you can check the level of your holding tanks. You can check that your gray holding tank is completely empty, black holding tank is completely empty, fresh holding tank is completely empty, and you can see that your battery is low. And the reason that that's showing low right now is because that furnace fan is still blowing, So there's a bit of a power draw there. Once the furnace fan goes off, that battery would show fair or good. If it's currently plugged in and charging, it'll show C for charge. The other things here are the switch for the water pump. So if you're camped away from water hookups and you're using water from your fresh water tank, you can turn on the water pump to pump water through your faucets. And your hot water heater can be activated from here as well. This is to start the hot water heater on propane. You'll remember from the outside there's that black rocker switch on the tank. If you want to run it on electricity, you can turn it on there. If you want to run it on propane, turn this switch on here. The little red fault light comes on, showing that the tank is not ignited right now. But we should hear that that igniter go, just like so. And I'm not going to leave that run right now because, as you know, the tank is empty and it's not a good idea to start that tank up without any water in it. If for any reason that light did not go out when you went to start the water tank, or if it went out only briefly and came back on, that's when you might have to go outside and press those two black reset buttons on the outside of that hot water tank. And in the bathroom, not a lot to talk about in here, aside from the RV sewer system. Anytime you're using the sewer system in the RV, you'll want to make sure and use a good, potent RV toilet chemical. The chemical comes in powder, liquid, or tablet form. Any of the three is fine to use. But when you add chemical into the bowl, you'll want to make sure and put some water down with it as well. So add a package of chemical into the bowl, press halfway down on the foot flush to fill the bowl with water, and then press the rest of the way down to flush everything down into the tank. Once you've put some toilet chemical into there, you should be good until the next time you dump your tanks. After you dump those holding tanks, you'll need to put a new supply of toilet chemical into the toilet. Always make sure to use the proper RV toilet paper with the RV's sewer system as well. It works with the toilet chemical to break down faster, so you don't get any clogs in your holding tank, and keeps your monitor panels reading accurately. And here in the bunk room, not a lot to cover here. You have an emergency exit window right here, and this style of emergency exit window can actually be propped open for ventilation if you like as well. If you do need to use it in the event of an emergency, it just hinges all the way up and you can escape that way. It's a little bit of a tricky mechanism, so I recommend just practicing that a few times just so that you're comfortable with it if you ever do need to use it in the case of an emergency. And a couple more safety features just to point out. You have a smoke detector here. The smoke detector uses its own 9-volt battery, so you'll want to check that periodically by pressing and holding the test button. And you can see that smoke detector is good and it's working. And you also have a carbon monoxide propane leak detector just down here. This one is actually hardwired into the RV's electrical system, so no need to check a battery here. And it'll do two things. It'll alert you to a potential propane leak, a potential carbon monoxide situation, but the third and most common thing that this does is it alerts you to low voltage, just like a smoke detector would when its battery is getting low. If your RV battery is getting very low, this detector will chirp to alert you to the low voltage. And I think for the most part that covers everything. Hopefully you've learned something about the 2010 KZ Spree 289 KS. If you have any questions, you can always get a hold of us here at Trailblazer or check our website, trailblazerrv.com. Thanks.